Cimoooooooo! What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my top 10 cards of 2019. Now, every year we get a huge injection of new product into the game, from main sets, side sets, special sets, and all these other different sources, but at the end of the year, there can only be 10 cards that stand out amongst the rest. And that's why I like bringing you guys this video, because it's kind of fun to reminisce and look at how the meta evolved as a whole on a competitive level. Now, to qualify for this list, it has to be something that was released throughout the year of 2019. So if it's like a card that was released in like 2008, but then became relevant in 2019, I'm not counting that. Only specifically cards in 2019 are going to be on this list. Now, before we get into it, I do want to let you guys know that I am still selling my Everyday I'm Summoning shirt over on my Teespring, which you can check out the link in the description below or click the card in the top right corner of the video. It's one of my favorite shirts now. It's actually super comfortable, and I really liked how the design came out, and a lot of you guys have already gotten yours as well for the holidays. So thank you guys so much for the support, and I really hope that you guys like my future designs like this one moving forward. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the list. Now, kicking things off with number 10, we have one of the most infamous and most hated cards of the year, and possibly of all time if I'm to be completely candid about it, Mystic Mine. Yes, Mystic Mine has impacted this game in so many different ways, whether it be the genesis of Mystic Mine Burn, which allowed some old school Burn players to kind of claw their way back into competitive relevance, or just being able to be played in a multitude of different strategies by just shutting down their opponent's plan. And if they don't have a natural out to it in the form of like spell and trap removal in the form of a spell and trap card, then they might have just lost the game right on the spot. Mystic Mine is just one of those cards that when you see it get dropped, it has that sinking feeling that you absolutely hate to see it, and it has caused a lot of rage amongst the community. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is one of the strongest cards of the year, and that's why I had to give it the number 10 slot. But coming in at number 9, for those of you who like to draw too, then this one is just for you. I'm talking Pot of Extravagance. I love the impact that this card has had on the game, because when you think about all the tier 2 and rogue strategies that have benefited from this card's existence, it's actually really wonderful. And what I love about it too is that the dynamic is it not only benefits these strategies, but typically the top meta strategies can't take advantage of a card like this because of the restrictions that Pot of Extravagance has. Maybe they're too reliant on the extra deck, or maybe they can't rely on using it at the start of main phase 1 compared to some of the other decks, or maybe the other restrictions on Pot of Extravagance are just too much for the top tier decks. And yes, you're not seeing it at the top tiers of competitive play, but think about how many decks have now been able to compete solely because of Pot of Extravagance's existence. I think that's incredible, and that's why I had to make the number 9 slot. Now, coming in at number 8, I actually had a tie, because both of these cards are both very impactful in their own right, belong to the same archetype, and it was kind of hard to pick between the two of them. So for my number 8 pick, I've got Servant of Endymion and Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic, both being released in the order of the Spellcaster structure deck. Both of these cards are just ridiculous. Servant allowing you to special summon any monster directly from your deck that can hold a spell counter, not even just of the Endymion archetype, but when you think about summoning stuff like Jackal King to be able to protect your board from being hit by Nibiru or hand traps or anything like that. So the tutor ability is insane. And then you have Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic, which is crazy in its own right. This might have some of the longest card text of any Yu-Gi-Oh card in existence. It has like 6 different effects, but honestly is just one hell of a boss monster and just does so much to boost Pendulum up to a status that it never had seen before. I think both of these cards are an incredible boost to any Pendulum player's deck, and that's why they had to make the number 8 slot. But coming in at number 7, we have our very first Link monster of the list, which really should come as no surprise considering Link monsters are some of the strongest in the game, and that is IP Masquerade. Now, Masquerade came out relatively recently, but I definitely think it's deserved the number 7 slot on this list. Not only has it just boosted decks to a completely different level, being able to Link summon during your opponent's turn, going into stuff like Nightmare Unicorn, Topologic Trisbania, Topologic Bomber Dragon, Topologic Zeroboros. I could keep going on, but I think IP Masquerade is going to continue to be a staple in extra decks for the years to come, just simply due to the fact of how powerful of a card it really is. In a lot of instances, if your board is not really that great, if you can end on a Masquerade, you can feel pretty good about it. And then the decks that have multiple layers of disruption Exaggeration in addition to a Masquerade, those are some of the hardest boards to beat over, so that's why I think Masquerade deserves the number 7 slot. Now coming in at number 6, we have another Link monster, which debatably you can maybe swap this with Masquerade, but I think this one outclasses Masquerade by just a bit, and that is Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess. Appaloosa is one of the craziest cards we had received all year, simply due to the fact that it's not only a Link 4 monster that can have a ridiculously high attack power. People don't care about that. People care about the fact that this card can basically represent 3 to 4 monster negations in a single card. And yeah, it doesn't destroy, but if your opponent is wasting their cards, like say their hand traps or anything to that degree, then it doesn't matter because they have to discard those cards to the graveyard for cost. You can negate effects wherever they activate, whether it's in the hand, in the graveyard, on the field, and you can continuously use that. It's not like it's a once per turn. You can use all the activations in a single turn. This has been one of the biggest key staple cards for a lot of combo decks moving forward now, and a lot of decks to protect them and solidify their boards from being disrupted by hand traps. Just like Masquerade, I definitely think Appaloosa is going to continue to see play in a lot of decks moving forward, although it might be a little bit more limited in its application. I think it's a lot more high impact than a card like Masquerade is, and so for those reasons, that's why I gave Appaloosa the number 6 slot. But coming in at number 5, we're halfway through and we still have plenty of powerful monsters to discuss, and number 5 is no exception. We have another tie, as a matter of fact. It's going to be between Salomon Great Gazelle and Salomon Great Sunlight Wolf. Again, both of these cards both came out this year, and it's so difficult to pick one over the other. Hell, you could arguably put even more Salomon Great monsters in here as well, but both of these cards are essential key pieces to the Salomon Great archetype and are the reason the deck is as powerful as it is. Gazelle essentially tutoring for anything that you want, since the deck is so graveyard reliant. You can get your Spinny, your Foxy, your Jack Jaguar, or any of your spells and traps in addition to that, which can then be easily recurred with cards like your Sunlight Wolf. Sunlight Wolf is a powerhouse in itself, essentially representing like a +2 in terms of card advantage every single turn, assuming that it has been reincarnation link summoned. Both of these are the heart and soul of the Salomon Great strategy, and Gazelle's limited to 1 for a reason, but the deck is still going to prosper, and I really don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. For those reasons, that's why I'm going to give Salomon Great my number 5 slot. But coming in at number 4, oh boy, do we have a trinity of cards that no one wants to remember, but they definitely deserve a spot on this list. The Guard Dragons. Yes, LP, Pissy, and Agripane all are a tie for this spot, and it makes sense, right? Because all of these cards go together, and yeah, sure, Agripane may be banned now, but people are still trying to find ways to incorporate Guard Dragons into their deck to this very day. Thunder Dragons still take advantage of it. Pendulum still takes advantage of it. Back in the day, Crusadia took advantage of it. The Guard Dragons were an absolutely terrifying menace upon this game, and it was one of the most unfair things when they were in their prime, and it's going to have a long-lasting legacy of probably going down in history as some of the strongest Link monsters ever printed due to the sheer power that they represented for an already very strong typing, if not one of the strongest typings in the entire game, being dragons. The Guard Dragons are infamous, they're notorious, and they deserve the number 4 slot. Now coming in at number 3, we have a card that made a tremendous impact on the game upon its release, and funny enough, it was actually in the Megatons, and you already know where I'm going with this. It's Nibiru, the Primal Being. I remember when they first announced Nibiru, and all of us lost our damn minds just because of how powerful of a card Nibiru really is. Nibiru was like the ultimate combo breaker for any sort of combo deck, being able to kind of play around all these different types of effects and being able to just tribute off the whole board, which meant that it played around like destruction protection, targeting protection, all these different things. Sure, it's still an activated effect, so stuff like Appaloosa and different cards can block it, but nonetheless, that doesn't take away from the fact that Nibiru is still one of the most played cards to this very day. Nibiru is going to shape this game moving forward as long as it remains in the game, and combo players always have to be on edge knowing that a card like Nibiru exists. But it's not even just the combo decks that suffer from this card's existence. Salomon Great's hurt by it, Orcus is hurt by it, even top meta strategies are hurt by it because they do tons of special summoning inherently, and the thing is, if your deck special summons a lot, you always have to worry about counting to 5. So for those reasons, that's why I have Nibiru at my number 3 slot. But coming in at number 2, we have probably one of the most powerful generic monsters we are ever going to see in this game's history, which we really don't see very often anymore, and that is Fantastical Dragon Fantasma. Yeah, I might be a little bit biased, but hey, it's my list, so I can do what I want. This card is just insane. The fact that it's like a +1 and like a pot of greed in the form of a monster, generating you +1 in card advantage. You get to keep the monster on the board, which is a 2400 body, which hits over like a lot of things and the competitive status. You have the ability to sculpt and mold your hand in a way that you get to keep your best cards and shuffle your worst ones back, while also maybe fixing your hand, because if you drew like a necessary engine piece, you can shuffle that back into your deck to turn your more powerful cards online that may have been dead had you not had the Fantasma. And if that weren't enough, guess what? It also has a targeting protection effect if any of your monsters get threatened, which is very important in specific matchups that have a lot of targeting based removal. I think this card just does so many different really powerful things, and as long as Link monsters remain relevant in the game, Fantasma is going to be a default for people to go to. There's a reason why this card is $100, because there is no other card that does anything like it, and for those reasons, that's why I gave Fantasma my number 2 slot. Now, before I get to my number 1, I did have a couple of honorable mentions. First up is Salomon Great Mirage. While this little card doesn't really do much on its own, it enabled strategies for some other decks that really had no other way to enable these strategies otherwise. Decks like Altergeist and Cyber Dragon, just by linking off one of their key play starters, it actually enabled so much for these decks and brought them even further up the tier ladder and made them more competitively relevant. So I definitely thought that was worth mentioning. And the other card is Utopia Double. Any 2 level 4s resulting into basically an OTK, essentially equated to another Boral Sword Dragon-esque win condition for any rank 4 base deck. And there's still a lot of decks that play a hefty level 4 engine, whether it's like Lunalight Orchest or Magical Musketeers or all these different decks that can play level 4s. As long as you can facilitate rank 4s, you're basically going to be playing this card because you can just steal games out of nowhere, and hey, you might even win a trip to Worlds in the process. But that's gonna bring us to my number 1 card of 2019, and it's Dingirsu, the Orchest of the Evening Star. Oh my god, this card is absurd. The fact that not only does this just require you to slap it on top of any Orchest Link monster you have, which if that doesn't sound like an anime style effect, I don't know what does, but the fact that you then have one of 2 abilities you can select from on Special Summon, being sending any card on the field to the graveyard, which means it gets around any sort of destruction or targeting protection, which is like 98% of the metagame. You can also recycle your resources by attaching cards that are banished underneath him, namely something like Orcus Symbol Skeleton, and have this Dante Seer Loop sort of interaction, and he's like 2600 attack in addition to that. Oh, but if that weren't enough, guess what? As long as he has materials underneath him, you can protect all your cards on your field, because if any of them were to be destroyed, you can just detach a material from Dingirsu instead, and oh, guess what? That's not once per turn, and it's also not like an activated effect, so you can't like respond to it. This card is just absolutely ridiculous. It has shaped and molded the format as we know it. It's the reason why Orcus is definitively like the best deck of the current format, at least at the time of recording this video. This card definitively has to be the best card of 2019, just because of the impact and what it's essentially done to the game. People were splashing Orcus in every single deck imaginable when Nightmare Mermaid was legal, and for good reason, and that's because Dingirsu definitely deserves it. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about your top 10 cards of 2019. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.